Hello, welcome to the Comic Book Commentary. I'm Bo Leidig, and this week we're going to be diving back into the mid-2010s series that is based on probably my favorite 80s property with He-Man and the Masters of the Universe number 4. So let's zoom in and take a closer look. First published in January of 2013, we see here on the cover that this issue is keeping with the same, theme of the, second and third issue, where they reveal the featured villain on the cover. And this is probably one of my only major complaints about this issue. And I know it seems like I'm nitpicking, but the reality is the stories that are featured on the interior of these issues are all based around revealing what villain He-Man, or in this case Adam, is winding up facing off against. And it's like supposed to be a surprise reveal that you find out about halfway through the book. Now, this worked to great effect in issue number 1, where we only had He-Man on the front cover, and then halfway through the issue, we find out to our surprise that he now has to fight with Beastman. Unfortunately, they kept continuing to write the stories in that manner, but instead decided to just start showing us who the featured villain was right on the cover. And from a marketing standpoint, it probably helped sell books, but it does kind of ruin that reveal aspect of, finding out who the villain's going to be. And I don't know, it just kind of irritates me a little bit. Like, it was so much more fun in that first issue to, turn the page and suddenly like, holy crap, Beastman. And with the way that they started doing the covers after that first issue, we kind of lose out on that. And it kind of bugs me a little bit. As we open the issue, we see not the credits for the issue, which is not really a criticism on this book in particular, but more so just on DC as a whole and kind of the way that they operate in this big corporate world. And we instead get this full-page ad for collegehumor.com, a website that will definitely never fall into insignificance. Never. Meanwhile, back into the actual story, we see that things are picking up the day after the ship that Adam and Teela were traveling on was sunk by Merman. Merman, of course, made the classic 1980s villain mistake of just assuming that he had killed the two of them and never bothered to check. This allowed the two of them to escape, and they're now stranded on a raft fashioned out of some debris that was left over from the ship. We see that Adam has fashioned a fishing pole and is trying to catch some food. However, Teela, always the eternal optimist, tells him that it doesn't really matter how much food he catches because they don't have any fresh water to drink, and without that, they're not going to last long. We also see that Zor is still hanging around the two of them, always nearby. They still don't know exactly what Zor's role in all of this is. Keep in mind, Zor is not technically real, as they can reach right through the bird. However, the bird can still interact with physical objects, sort of, but not always. That's a weird part that's still not explained. And things are kind of not looking great for the two of them as they're trying to figure out exactly how they're going to survive the predicament they're in. Seeing as how the two of them are stuck on a raft with literally nowhere to go, Teela takes this opportunity to ask Adam how he had somehow forgotten he was a prince. However, Adam wants her to can it with the whole prince business and even says, are you really going to take that merman's word for it? Teela, however, responds with the observation that it was Merman's intention to kill the two of them, so why would he lie? Adam retorts by saying, well, I think he just wanted to kill me, you just happen to be in the way. Teela kind of snickers a little bit at it and then yells at the bird, which she calls Mirage Bird, to go find another ship to try and save them. We then see Zor take off, and Adam says that, I think you actually hurt its feelings. They then get to talking, and as Adam sits down, Teela asks, so what started you out on this journey? And he responds, it was dreams I was having. And then Teela says, dreams of heroism and a guy with a skull face and that sort of thing. And Adam says, how did you know? And she says, I didn't. I was having those exact same dreams. However, their conversation is then interrupted when Zor, who again, is not a solid being, and while it can maintain the illusion of landing on people and things, it doesn't have a real physical form in terms of like being able to interact with like objects in terms of picking things up, but somehow manages to pick up a coconut and drop it onto Teela's head. This, of course, enrages Teela as she starts to curse the bird. However, Adam realizes that, wait a minute, coconuts aren't just floating around out here. Where did this come from? And then they turn around and happen to notice that there is an island with a smoking volcano on it. And Teela says, maybe those ores you wanted to fashion earlier weren't the worst idea, as they realize this is their chance to possibly survive. Later on, as the two of them walk up onto the beach, Adam says, when you told me to make these oars, I thought that maybe you were going to help me row. Teela, however, says, that's how you get man muscles. Adam laughs it off and says, yeah, sure. As they continue to walk forward, they notice that they believe there's something that drew them to this island, and they both have a sneaking suspicion that they're actually supposed to be here. However, as their conversation continues, it's suddenly interrupted when a ball lands on the ground in front of them and bursts open into some purple smoke, which knocks the two of them unconscious, leaving them easy capture for some not so and also familiar faces. We then get an advertisement for the Arrow tie-in comic that is supposed to be based on the hit show on the CW. And then also a novel called Zombie that is written by Darren Shan. I don't remember ever seeing this book or hearing about it. If you did read it, though, let me know if it was any good in the comments section, because I'm genuinely curious. We then find out that their captor is none other than Teela's father, Duncan, aka Man-at-Arms, who is working against them and also doesn't realize who either one of them are, as he doesn't recognize them. He's got a squad of goons with him, and they've knocked the two of them out and are working for someone else that Duncan states that they need to get these two back to. Gee, I wonder who that someone else could be. I wonder if they're potentially Evil-Lyn, who's featured on the cover. We then finally get to see the credits for this issue, so let's go ahead and read them. Writer, Keith Griffin. Penciler, Pop Mon. Oh wait, not just Pop Mon, also Philip Tan, who for some reason penciled specifically pages 12 and 13. I don't know why. Inkers, Pop Mon, who inked every single page that he penciled, and then Roy Jose, who inked the 2 pages that Philip Tan drew, which is also super weird. Colors, Lee Laldridge. Letters, Sadia Temfonte. Temofonte. I'm really sorry. I know there's no way I'm pronouncing that right. Dave Wilkins on the cover, and editor Michael McAllister. We then get an advertisement for Midtown Comics, which is kind of weird. This is their basically holiday, aka Christmas ad, and this book was published in January, so this might have been a mistake on DC's part, or perhaps they just hadn't sent DC a new ad template to place, and we're just continuing with this 20% off sale into the new year. There's no way of knowing. After tying up Teela and Adam, the band of men under Man-at-Arms control start to transport them back to their home base. One of the men, who seems to be the number 2 in the group, starts to talk to Duncan, asking, how do you think she figured they'd be here right at that moment? And Duncan replies, I don't question any of it. I'm not curious. And he says, why not? And Duncan tells him, well, being curious lands you in the cauldron. The man then says, oh, come on, you don't have to worry about that as long as you're loyal. And Duncan says, yeah, you keep telling yourself that. Then the man makes the mistake of turning back and taking a glance at Teela and says, pretty cute, huh? I've been sneaking a few peeks myself, which causes an involuntary reaction as Duncan immediately punches the man in the face, sending him flying. The man then gets up stating, hey, if you wanted her, all you had to do was say so. You don't have to get violent about it. Meanwhile, back at the volcano, we see there's actually a fortress built onto the side of it, and there's a conversation going on as someone says, this is exquisite. Do you know how long I've been waiting for this moment? Duncan replies, no, I don't. And the other person says, well, that was a rhetorical question. Duncan then apologizes, and then the person says, no, none of that. We're not going to have you ruining my moment with your constant. And of course, there's really no buildup as to who he's talking to because Evil-Lyn was on the cover of this issue. We then find that we are in the throne room of one Evil-Lyn as Duncan replies, woeful ignorance. And she says, yes, that's it, woeful ignorance. That's what you're doing right now, and that's what's bugging me. She then states, will those binds hold them? I don't want a repeat of last time, which we don't know exactly what she's referring to there. And Duncan says, yes, they'll hold. They've been endowed with, a magical spell. And then she starts to look at Duncan and realize that his gaze is fixed on Teela. She says, oh, beautiful is she not? You haven't been able to take your eyes off her at all. And Duncan says, she is familiar to me, which leads us to believe that he knows something's up here, but whatever's happened to him to make him lose his memory about his past is enough to prevent him from fully recognizing his own daughter. However, Evil-Lyn says, oh, no, we're not going to have any of that. You're only going to have memories that I give you. You're only going to, find things relevant if I tell you they are. She then tells him to repeat that back to her as he does. And at this point, we see Teela and Adam start to whisper amongst themselves and try to figure out exactly what's going on. On the next page, we see an advertisement for the CW show Arrow. And it seems to me that you would have had the advertisement for the TV show before the advertisement for the tie-in comic, in terms of it just making more sense to the person reading this and, whoever your potential audience might have been for the tie-in comic. But, again, that's just me. Teela then tells Adam that she's pretty sure that Evil-Lyn is off her rocker, and says, are you listening to this woman? And that's the point where Adam says, Evil-Lyn, her name is Evil-Lyn. And Teela's like, wait a minute, are you positive? Have you two met? And Adam's like, maybe, I can't remember. And then their conversation is interrupted when Evil-Lyn states, well, I'm waiting. And Adam's like, wait, what? And at this point, he and Teela realize that they should have been paying attention to her because she's been addressing the two of them directly. She then states, did I or did I not just ask you a question? Teela, thinking on her feet, tells Adam to just say yes, because this type of loon only hates being disagreed with more than they hate being ignored. And Adam's like, are you sure? And Teela's like, yeah, have you not been paying attention to the way that she's been talking to my father? At this point, the two of them just look at each other in awe as Adam's like, holy crap, that was crazy, as they realize that Teela somehow knows that Duncan's her father when she shouldn't, and their memories are kind of flooding back, but in a jumbled manner. However, their conversation is interrupted at this point when Duncan lunges forward and punches Adam across the face and scolds him for disrespecting his queen. He then states that, he'll not be disrespectful and that he'll speak when spoken to. At this point, Adam says, yes, whatever it is, I agree to it. And we hear Teela also exclaim, father, as Man-at-Arms steps in front of her, standing over Adam's body. At this point, Evil-Lyn says, all right, cool, great, we're going to have a festival, get the cauldron prepared. Adam doesn't like the sound of that as he asks Man-at-Arms what this is all about as he's being helped to his feet. And Man-at-Arms tells him not to worry about it, but it's going to be bloody. Adam's like, yeah, I probably should have figured that, as he and Teela are led away to their holding cells as Man-at-Arms and the rest of Evil-Lyn's men prepare the cauldron for some nefarious acts that are going to be happening pretty soon. On the next page, we get an advertisement for Wonder Woman issue number 15, of course, from the New 52 era of DC Comics. And getting back into the story, we see that Evil-Lyn has retired to her chambers and is having a conversation with none other than Skeletor, who is somewhat disappointed by the fact that Adam and Teela are still alive, angry that Merman has failed him along with Trapjaw and Beastman. And he really wants to make sure that Adam dies and is upset that Evil-Lyn has not just killed him on sight. She states, however, there'd be no fun in that. I've got a whole gala planned around the cauldron, and this is going to be a lot of fun. And Skeletor's like, yeah, that sounds fun and all, but could you not just slit his throat for me? And once again, Lynn says, no, and there's nothing to worry about because she'll make sure that He-Man is dead and gone by the end of the day. However, this enrages Skeletor as he screams to her, "Do not invoke that name. Never again invoke that name," as she closes the magical window that she was communicating with him through, and she smirks to herself and says, "Don't worry, dead and gone, I promise," as she is gonna just do things on her own, regardless of what Skeletor quote-unquote commands. We then see an advertisement for Red Hood and the Outlaws Volume 1, and this one always seemed a little bit weird to me. Now, full disclosure, I never actually read this comic book, and if I'm completely talking out of my ass right here, I do apologize. But the Bat Family narrative that existed in the New 52 revolved, of course, around all the members of the Bat Family, who don't have any superpowers. We also see that Arsenal was involved. He doesn't have superpowers either. And then Starfire, who has a bunch of superpowers. She just seems really out of place, and maybe that was a big story point. I don't know, but it just seems weird is all. Meanwhile, back at Castle Grayskull, we see that Skeletor is quite angry about what has just transpired and is upset that it seems as though right as Adam is in his clutches and could be dealt with immediately, he's given the chance to once again thwart Skeletor's plans. As, he's then spoken to by someone off page who says, it's understandable that Evil-Lyn would go this route as she has histories with the two of them. Then Skeletor responds, "History," and we see the glowing red skull that Skeletor was holding on the very last page of the first issue, which we haven't seen since the first issue, is the one that's speaking to him. And that skull says, no, she has histories. She's been humiliated by them countless times, and this is her opportunity to finally get even. And that, you're not any different, really. And Skeletor is like, hey, choose your words carefully. The skull then says, look, the reality is that He-Man and Teela, or Adam, he states, he's forbidden from using the word He-Man. He states, they've been constantly humiliating you at every turn, not just you, but all of those who work under your employ. And, Evil-Lyn finally has a chance to enact her own form of comeuppance, and she wants to take this opportunity. And, you would probably do the exact same thing if you were in the situation that she's in. However, Skeletor argues, oh, no, I'd kill them immediately. And the skull then replies, well, then why don't you? And Skeletor states, well, no, I can't abandon Grayskull, not when I'm so close. The skull then states to Skeletor, you're no closer to unlocking the secrets of Grayskull now than when you first arrived, and that the sorceress, despite being tortured to near death, is still eluding you, and you fear her. This, of course, makes Skeletor furious to hear as he picks up the skull and says, how dare you speak to me in that manner? And just as he's about to smash the skull on the ground, the skull states, she is formidable. This catches Skeletor's attention as he brings the skull back down and says, she's the key to unlocking the power of Grayskull. And the skull states, is that true, or is that just what she would have you believe? As there's no greater deception than someone who's willing to suffer for a cause that doesn't really exist. However, Skeletor retorts by stating, I'm going to do whatever it takes to make her, divulge the secrets to Grayskull, even if I have to torture her twice as much as I already have. And then he looks over and sees the servant that's been in the room overhearing all of this and tells the man, well, I can't have this conversation leaving this room, so unfortunately, I'm going to have to kill you. But don't worry, I'm going to make it quick and painless, as the man looks on in terror. And you really feel bad for this guy, as he was just trying to do his job. Unfortunately, he's working for someone as evil as Skeletor, and that's going to be his undoing. Back on the island, we see that it is now nightfall, and Duncan is awoken and having a whole lot of trouble sleeping as we see him put on his clothes and walk out to the two cages that are holding Adam and Teela. He looks at Teela and states, girl, what manner of enchantress are you? Teela retorts, I'm not an enchantress. Do I look like one? But then Duncan says, you haunt my dreams every night, and I'm unable to sleep in any type of peace because of it. We then get a big 2-page ad for Justice League, Throne of Atlantis, and this unfortunately is one of the underhanded ways in which companies try to get you to buy more books than you otherwise would have. Perhaps you were just subscribing to Aquaman. Well, if you want to get the entirety of this story, you're going to also have to pick up some issues of Justice League, because without those issues, you're going to have huge holes in the storyline. And it kind of sucks. I really don't like when comic book companies do this. And it just, I don't know, it kind of always feels slimy. I understand, like, yeah, Aquaman's a key member of the Justice League, but that doesn't mean that his story has to spill over into another comic book. Like, he can have his own story while also having stories that involve the Justice League as well. But then again, I guess you got to make that money somehow or another and do it however, you have to. But still, it kind of sucks for people buying the books to have to buy extra books that they're not interested in necessarily. Teela then cuts right to the chase and asks Duncan directly, "Are you my father?" He, however, says nothing, stares at her blankly, and then walks off. Adam asks, "Do you think he took you seriously?" And Teela's like, "I believe so." She's like, "I know I think he's my father." And then Adam says, this means that whatever's happening is happening to more than just the two of us. But then Teela says, "But who's behind all this?" Adam then says, it should be obvious at this point, whoever's manipulating that bird is manipulating the two of us as well. But Teela says, to what end would this be going to? And Adam responds by saying, "I don't know, why don't you ask your father?" This, of course, does not go over well with Teela, as she doesn't speak to him again the rest of the night. And then the next morning, they're escorted to the main hall of the fortress, which houses the cauldron, which we can see is a giant pit of liquid. Adam then states, "Hey, I apologize. I'm sorry. It was in bad taste. I shouldn't have made that joke." And Teela's like, "Whatever," as he's like, "Okay, cool. You finally said something to me. I guess that's progress." They're then interrupted as Evil-Lyn starts her speech as she states, "Applaud my subjects for the sacrifice that these two are about to make." And Teela's like, "Oh, sacrifice? That doesn't sound good." And Adam's like, "Yeah, that's what I was worried about last night." We then get an advertisement for Before Watchmen featuring Moloch. I didn't read any of these books. I don't know if they were any good. If you do, feel free to let me know in the comments section. Meanwhile, back in the story, Evil-Lyn states, "Let the games begin. One to the cauldron, the other to glory. Let us start." At this point, Adam and Teela realize that things are starting to get really out of hand as they get back to back, believing they're about to be attacked. Unfortunately, they're not. What ends up happening is that Evil-Lyn lights the cauldron, drops their magical bindings, and then states that the two of them have to fight one another to the death, which doesn't exactly go over well with Adam or Teela. Adam, not enjoying the situation, turns to Evil-Lyn and states, "We'll die before we fight for your amusement." Teela's like, "Wait, I never agreed to that." And then before she can continue to protest, she's shot in the shoulder with a bolt from a crossbow. At this point, she's like, "Okay, I get it now. You'll just have to play along." As Adam's like, "Wait, play along?" And before he can get any more questions out, she knees him in the gut and states, "If we stop fighting, they start shooting." And she then tells Adam to make it look good, as he's like, "Do we really have a choice?" And he's like, "Also, how's that playing it by ear thing you were talking about coming along?" She then clips him with an uppercut to the chin and states, "That's for being a smart mouth." Adam says, "Hey, maybe we can maneuver ourselves close enough to the guards and he's cut off by Teela, who says, "We'd be dead before we can do any damage." At this point, Adam's like, "All right, well, I guess it's a real fight then." And Teela's like, "Wait, are you really going to throw me into the fire?" And Adam's like, "Well, no, but you're probably going to stop me from trying to jump in," as he reveals to her that he plans on sacrificing himself so that she can live, which is pretty noble considering the fact that Teela treats him like garbage most of the time. Meanwhile, up on the balcony, Duncan states to Evil-Lyn, "If she dies, I'll kill you." As, again, he has somewhat of an involuntary reaction to protecting his daughter. Evil-Lyn turns around and is like, "Wait a minute, what did you just say?" And at this point, Duncan realizes, like, "Holy crap, what was that? Where did that come from?" And he's like, it was, just me muttering to myself." As Teela and Adam continue to fight, Teela's like, "You're not going to throw yourself into the cauldron. I'm not going to allow that." And Adam's like, "Do we have any choice? One of us has to live." And Teela's like, "Okay, do you really trust her though?" We then get an advertisement for a Batman The Dark Knight Returns statue, which is pretty cool. Like, I like this whole fight between him and Superman that's happening. Batman, of course, wearing the armor suit that he created to try and fight off Superman. I like that it's based too on like the original comics artwork. I think this is a really cool statue. Not that I bought it, because I definitely didn't, but still, it looks really good. Back in the story, we see Adam and Teela continuing to fight. Adam stating, listen, slim hope is better than no hope, and Teela protesting like, hey, that's not your decision to make. However, in the middle of their fight, Zor suddenly swoops in and tries to kind of attack Adam, and Teela's like, what are you doing? You're supposed to be attacking the bad guys, not us. However, this knocks Adam off balance as he falls off of the bridge and into the cauldron, as we see Teela scream his name as things are looking pretty bad for our hero as we reach the final page of the story of this issue. We then reach 2 pages of what's next, which is just a little bit of blurbs about upcoming books that are going to be released by DC. Not terribly different from what we got with the image info section that we see in so many of the image books that I talk about on this channel. But this time they actually include a lot of artwork from the interior of those books, which I actually like a little bit better than just, text. Again, maybe that's really hard to do, or would have been more expensive to try and put into a lot of books, which is why Image wouldn't have done it, especially in the early years when they were really struggling for money. But I think it looks cool, and if you're someone who's interested in these books, this is a good way to kind of, get you going and be like, hey, check out what's coming up. We then get an advertisement of DC Comics All Access, which on this issue is focusing entirely on the release of the Batman Arkham City video game and the tie-in comics that are going to go along with that game, giving us some some images of the covers that are going to be going on there. They all look pretty cool. And, this is a big deal. The Arkham Asylum video game, of course, was a huge hit, and the Arkham City game was also going to end up being a huge hit. But DC was really trying to throw their weight behind making sure that that game did really well, which, who didn't think it was going to do well? Arkham Asylum was a gigantic success. And the idea that the sequel to that wouldn't be is kind of crazy to think that they would even consider that was a possibility. And then on the reverse inside cover, we get an advertisement for the NBA on TNT. It has nothing to do with comics or comic book tie-ins. It's just like, hey, do you like basketball? You can watch it on TNT. And that was He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, issue number 4. Overall, I think it's a really great issue. Obviously, I have my complaints. I really hate the fact that they're featuring the main, villain of the story right on the cover instead of letting it be a surprise reveal midway through the issue, even though that the story is written that they're supposed to be a surprise reveal. I also really hate the fact that DC was putting the credits to the issue like on the 5th page instead of the inside cover. And I still don't understand the whole idea with Popmon drawing all but 2 of the pages in this book. That doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense. But again, those critiques are more about the way that DC was operating more so than the actual story of this book. And I think the story of this book is fantastic. It's still building upon the mysterious nature of what's happening to Adam and Teela and now Man-at-Arms, who's been introduced. And it's slowly starting to explain why it is no one's been coming to Adam's aid, in the sense that we now realize that it's essentially all of the Masters of the Universe who were affected by whatever's happening to him. And none of them have any memories of their past. And they don't know, that they should be fighting against Skeletor, or, why any of the people who are doing things to them are doing these things to them. And I think it's really doing a good job of fleshing out that deep mystery that's been hovering over the entirety of this story. But then again, those are just my opinions, and your opinions may be completely different. You may think that it's terribly written and that none of it makes sense. But if that's the case, it's just fine, because everybody's entitled to their own opinion. If you enjoyed today's video, please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. And thanks for stopping by. Have a great day.